Hello, I'm Michael Steinman. I'm here with Ricky Riccardi, author of the wonderful new book, The Wonderful World of Louis Armstrong, The Magic of Louis Armstrong's Later Years. And we're talking at the Louis Armstrong Archives at Queens College Library. And Ricky, given the fact that after Louis's death, there have been 4 or 5 biographies, each of them valuable in its own way, why does the world need another Armstrong book? What made you want to write this one?
Well, the seeds of writing this book were planted pretty much the first time I heard Louis Armstrong's music, which was back in 1995. I was a sophomore in high school, and I saw the Glenn Miller story. Louis comes out, does Basin Street Blues, and I said, that's my guy right there. This guy's fantastic. So my mother took me to the local library, and I checked out a CD called 16 Most Requested Songs. It was a Columbia compilation of Louis's 1950s recordings. Satch Plays Fats, Ambassador Satch, Louis Plays Handy. And that one disc completely changed my entire life right then and there. So immediately I knew I had to read every word about Louis and listen to every recording I could find. Well, the more I read, back then there was the James Lincoln Collier book. Soon after I got into Louis, there was the Lawrence Bergreen book. Both those books were identical in that they were very detailed on early Louis and Louis in the 1920s and Louis in New Orleans and the Hot Fives and Hot Sevens. And once they reached a point, the birth of the All-Stars, it was fast forward time. And it spoke of Louis in those last 25 years of his life in very general terms. Town hall concert, he mugged a lot, he played the same solos, some hit records, he went commercial, there's some Little Rock and there's Hello Dolly, and he dies in 1971, the end. And every time I would read that stuff, my head would shake, because those were the years that, that got me into Louis. So I said, there's a story there, The story was told in liner notes by Dan Morgenstern, and Gary Giddens did a great appreciation of those years in Satchmo. But I knew that there was an epic saga in those years. Louis traveling the world, how hard he worked, how hard he pushed himself, the varied music he made, from All-Stars blowing sessions to the Verve sessions with Oscar Peterson and Ella Fitzgerald. He's recording with Gordon Jenkins. He's doing everything. He's working harder than ever before. He's challenging himself, recording with Dave Brubeck and Duke Ellington. And there was more to those years than anyone previously had given him credit for. So pretty early on, when I was still in high school, I said, wow, this would be a book I would love to write one day. And it's probably taken over a decade from that point, but we're sitting here and the book is finally ready to roll.
So you're saying that all the old stories about Louis's creativity peaking in 1927 and playing solos note for note are wrong, and that will people get a new appreciation for Louis reading this book, do you think?
That's my goal. That's my goal, because I did a lot of work right here in this room at the Louis Armstrong Archives, where I now work, but this is where I did research beginning in 2006, especially with Louis's private tapes. And when you spend time with Louis himself and you hear him explain why he took the same solos night after night, because the solos were great and because he worked at them, and that's how he always did it in the 1920s. And to hear him talk about his trumpet playing, saying in 1956 that he was playing better than ever before, you get a sense for how much he valued himself. He knew he was still doing great things. He knew he was more popular than ever. And if the jazz elite and the young musicians, if they stopped paying attention, well, it was their loss. And the folks who did pay attention to Louis in the 40s, 50s, and into the 60s, it's an embarrassment of riches how much he left behind. Those all-star shows are some of the most entertaining things in the history of jazz, but the studio recordings are great, and everything's great, and he knew how great it was, and he worked so hard. And that's what bothers me more than almost anything, the assumption that Louis coasted in the later years of his life. Therefore, these years aren't worth discussing, because here he is relaxing. This young creative genius is resting on his laurels, playing Hello Dolly every night, smiling, and barely playing the trumpet. And again, when you spend time with Louis and you hear the man in his own words and you read it, he always said he trained like a fighter for these gigs. I have a long description in my book from Louis's friend Jack Bradley about a day in the life of Louis Armstrong. Pretty much from the minute he woke up, which was usually in the late afternoon, until showtime, he was all business. Every thought was about that show that night. He would immediately pick up the horn, start practicing, get his lips together, play along with the TV, play along with the radio, be the first one at the concert hall. Yeah, and sure, the All-Stars played a lot of the same songs every night, but he was always changing it up. He could see what kind of audience it was, if they wanted a lot of fast songs, if they wanted a lot of slow songs. He had a huge repertoire to choose from. And it was that kind of dedication, what he put into keeping himself in shape and keeping that horn sounding the way it did for so many years. So that's my big thing, is I don't want people to take this period for granted anymore, because these were some of the hardest, most taxing years of Louis's life, but some of the most enriching and endearing and just wonderful years, and it's time they get their due.
And their creative years. That's the thing. If you watch the footage that Louis left behind, the television appearances, the concert appearances, you see somebody who is really changing small details within a framework. And it's ironic that we have so much more documentation of Louis in this last 25 years than we had in the quote-unquote creative period, so that people can really study this as you've done.
Well, one thing that really helped open my mind, again, right here at the Armstrong Archives, is we have scrapbooks that Louis himself kept from the 1920s, filled with reviews of Louis's live stage performances. And like you said, there's no Louis Armstrong live at the Vendome Theater bootleg CD. We can dream, but it's not there. So all we have are the Hot Fives and Hot Sevens and the records. But then, the Gunther Schullers and those critics all started, marginalizing it. So it's not just that we have the Hot Fives and Sevens. We only have certain Hot Fives and Hot Sevens. We have Western Blues, we have Potato Head Blues. These are approved. We have Cornet Chop Suey. Well, anybody with a pair of ears who listens to the complete Hot Fives and Hot Sevens will have to get through Big Fat Mon, Skinny Pa, and Irish Black Bottom. And, Louis is having fun, and he's an entertainer way back during the creative period. Well, studying these scrapbooks and reading the reviews weren't about Louis Armstrong, serious artist, came out on stage last night with a straight face and blew West End blues for 45 minutes, took a solemn bow, and walked off stage with a robe around his shoulders. All the reviews focused on how entertaining he was. The biggest laugh of the season was Louis Armstrong doing his preacher routine, and Louis Armstrong in drag and doing all this stuff. He was always a natural-born entertainer. So that's another goal of the book, is to completely nullify the theory of the two Armstrongs, the early serious genius and the later clown, because when you really dig in, it's actually much more consistent than it at first appears. The same guy who was playing pop songs and clowning on stage in 1965 was doing the same thing in Chicago in 1925. Then he made $50 and knocked off a Potato Head Blues, but to him that was just a few minutes worth of work. It was time to get back on the stage and make the people happy. So that's really a big thing. Just there was one Louis Armstrong from the beginning to the end. So enjoy all of it, because it's pretty great.
And we do. I've read the book. I am absolutely admiring of it. It's going to be out on June 26th, I think.
June 21st.
June 21st, and it's published by Pantheon. It's called What a Wonderful World, The Magic of Louis Armstrong's Later Years, and you'll love it. We'll be back. Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you, Michael.